Scott. I've got with me Scott the beekeeper. Good morning, Scott. How are you?
Hello, everybody. Good morning. It's going well.
It's a
Yeah.
rainy day.
The rain came out of nowhere.
Was it supposed to be nice today?
Cloudy, with a chance of meatballs.
Cloudy with a chance. Another cartoon.
Yes. Yes. I've not actually seen it though. I want to be clear. I've not seen it.
Hmm.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's true or not. We'll
Well,
have to take that out to the jury.
okay. I see you got a nice little beard developing here.
Yeah, I'm working something out here. I'm working something
I
out.
like it. Check it out on YouTube or Facebook,
I'm
whatever you
working
want to see
something
this.
out. I'm working something out. Actually, I'll be honest with you. It's out of pure laziness.
I've been there many times.
I can tell.
Yep.
It's out of pure laziness. It's just, it's easy just because the thing is that when you haven't shaved for a few days, the neck starts to itch. And if you notice, like shirts pull little hairs out, or, the seat melt rub on it the wrong way. And it's very annoying.
It's a battle.
So it's real quick to go wham, 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 and leave that and go. It cuts the shave time down in half.
Yep.
Therefore, it's out of just pure. I'm like a bee on a cloudy day. I'm just not leaving the hive.
Unfortunately, you couldn't be at home today. You had to be here.
I could be at home today if I wanted.
I guess you
but
could have.
I chose to be in. I was looking at the beehives this morning, and they were not active at all.
Oh no.
I even went out and
Was it raining at the house?
no, it wasn't raining yet. I went out and rapped on one of them, and they didn't even come out.
They probably
I
weren't too
knocked on
happy.
the side.
Like, hey, good morning, everybody. Wakey, wakey.
Yeah, they didn't even. I was wondering if they were dead. I'm just kidding.
Don't think they're
not dead. But you know what I have seen is Les the beekeeper who was on our show.
Yeah.
He lost a hive. I
Mhm.
think yesterday. I noticed that there were thousands and thousands of dead bees that he had.
Oh, interesting.
And I've noticed that I'm a part of a lot of Facebook groups and a lot of just, somehow I got connected to a lot of bee people. And I've noticed that many, many people have been sharing pictures of massive hive loss. Massive, massive hive loss. And I guess one of the things is that, somebody will show a picture and they've got a, maybe a frame or something like that, and there'll be just piles of dead bees.
Yeah.
On it. And these people are pretty torn up about it. A lot of people are really bothered by their hive loss. And what I noticed is that, in that hive loss, people are always asking, does anybody know what happened?
Yeah.
And some people will say, oh, it's varroa mites, or, dearth was one of the things we had talked about
Yep.
quite a while ago. And then you always see, you'll see some more experienced beekeepers that tend to get in there and comment. And one of the things that they've been mentioning that I've noticed is, no, it's lack of feeding.
Yeah. Starvation.
Your bees had lack of food. And then you'll see some comments that kind of come down and people will say, oh man, that's they'll say, oh yeah, you know what, that hive was kind of out of the way. I didn't get to it enough. Oh yeah, blah, blah. So feeding the bees is actually really, really important. And it seems like a lot of people that I'm just noticing out there keeping bees aren't feeding their bees, aren't giving their bees food all the time.
Mm-hmm.
We load them up with sugar water.
Yep.
We load them up with pollen patties.
Mm-hmm.
Why are those things important, and how often are you doing them?
Yeah, so I was actually in some hives yesterday and at the end of last week as well. Again, weather dependent, right? So it's got to be good weather to hop in there. And one thing I noticed is some of the frame feeders, we have inner frame feeders, some of them were empty, some were like half full, so it was like a good time to get in there and begin feeding, refill the ones that are empty, fill the ones up that weren't empty. Um, and then some still had pollen patties, let them finish their pollen patty,
What is a
some had
pollen
honey,
patty
they
for
had their own
anybody who
honey.
doesn't know?
Yeah, it's a pollen substitute. It's just there to strengthen the hive. And generally, it's best for brood. You put it above the brood chamber in the bottom box. And then that's going to be really good for the bees to feed from. Because the for us, at least with the inner frame feeder, our feeders on the side. And so not every bee is going to go to the side of the frame.
Right.
If they're feeding the baby bees in the middle, then it's going to be a lot easier for the pollen patty to be right there, and they can eat from that if they want to. So, yeah, feeding, and I haven't seen the photos that you were talking about, but one of the things that I've heard from some beekeepers I know and just kind of trying to be connected and follow what's going on is definitely starvation's kind of the big thing right now. I've heard, and we haven't experienced this yet in our hives, but I've heard a European foul brood is a bigger issue this year. But right now, at least I think in our local context in Western Washington, it is starvation that is the biggest thing, because you get a couple nice days, maybe we're getting 3 or 4 strung together, and then you got 3 or 4 rainy days, and then it pushes the bees right back inside. And so those rainy days, they're eating from their inside stores, which would be a pollen patty, a sugar water, or any honey that they've stored up, right? And so if they eat through all of that and they can't go out because of the weather, they're gonna starve. And that sucks. Sometimes you can't prevent it. Sometimes weather's so extreme that you can't do much about it. But for the most part, if you can feed regularly, like at least once a week, just even check the frame feeder, then you're gonna know. Or just pop open it. Do they have a pollen patty? Is there some source of food? And pay attention to the weather. Like, okay, it's a nice day, and then we're gonna have 5 rainy days coming up. I probably should top them off. Like just make sure they're doing well. Maybe in that 5 days there's a break and you can get in and check. But feed is a big deal.
Feed is a big deal.
And something that I wanted to talk about today is the idea of frame manipulation. In the bottom box, you're going to be, so for us, maybe not everyone's hive is set up the same. With an inside frame feeder, right? Maybe you have an external, or you do a bucket on top or something like that, or a jar I've seen. But if you have a frame feeder on the inside, the opposite wall should be a frame of honey. So something that I've had to do lately is rearrange our frames. If the honey is on the same side, then that's not good. All the food's on one side. You want the food to be opposite, so that bees on the other side don't have to go as far to get to the food if they need it. And they can have that source of food on that other opposite end. So you have to kind of manipulate the frames a little bit. If you notice there's an empty comb, or maybe you have just a foundation. So foundation would be the frame without any comb on it. A comb frame is going to have the drawn out comb on that. So just help you distinguish a little bit. So you want to have in the brood chamber 3 or 4 frames of brood. You don't really want to break that up. Maybe on the outside you could put in an empty comb in between those 2 frames, and they'll begin to fill that up with brood. So you kind of help manipulate the hive a little bit. If there's an empty frame, you might rearrange it so that it gets used, and you put the honey on the other side. So for feed-wise, they should have honey on one side. They should have a frame feeder on the other, or at least another source of food as well. That's what we've been doing. And then if you go to the second box, and this is something that we had another beekeeper come out, and he was just kind of helping look at some stuff and giving some advice. And he's more experienced than we are. And so he was walking me through a little bit of this frame manipulation in a second box. So for us, we have a mixture of comb and foundation in our second boxes. And so we want the bees to draw out the foundation. What this does is it provides an opportunity for the bees to lay brood in that or to make honey in that. So if you have a frame of foundation by itself, nothing's happening to it. It's great to take up some space so there's not awkward space in the hive or, wind to get through and that kind of stuff. But you want to put your comb frames in the middle and then the foundation frames on the outside so that they begin to mimic from the comb frames outward the pattern that they should be building. And then once they begin to build that pattern, you can take some of the foundation frames that they're building off of and slide them in between the comb frames. It becomes a checkerboard pattern of a foundation frame, a comb frame, a foundation frame, a comb frame, foundation, comb, alternating so that they build a proper comb on the foundation frames. Because we don't want.
When should someone start
jaded-
doing this? Should this start in the beginning? Should this start midway through?
It depends. You're gonna, like right now, most of our hives are second boxes. Not all, but most. There's a couple that I actually took down. I was like, I don't think you're actually as strong as I thought you were a couple weeks ago. So we're gonna let you go back to one and regrow a little bit of strength. For whatever reason, you look a little weaker now. And so having that extra space, bees are going to go one of two directions. They're going to go up or they're going to go out. I would rather you go out in your bottom box and fill it all out than go up to a second with empty frames down below, right? And then if you put a second box on too early, there's not going to be enough bees to build that out yet. You're just going to be giving them too much space to operate in. So you want it. It's one of those things you got to gauge. Is my hive ready for a second box? And if it is, are you using drawn out frames? Are you using foundation? If it's just foundation, you have no drawn out, you get a little bit risky of what's called cross comb, where they're going to build in between the two frames, but they're not going to necessarily build it properly where each frame can be pulled out on its own. It's going to be all combined. And then you got to rip it apart, and you potentially could rip apart the honey or some brood. So by having drawn out frames established already next to a foundation frame, they're going to be developing the foundation frame into a properly drawn out comb frame. And that's what you want it to become. The downside to that is it does take time. Like, it takes time for the bees to draw that out. So if you had all drawn out comb, your bees are going to be quicker to lay brood and they're going to be quicker to make honey. With the foundation frames, it's going to take more time. They're not going to be as quick to lay brood. They're not going to be as quick to lay or to make honey. However, it's always good to have new frames being drawn out because you will have to replace frames. Like, the frames only have such a long lifespan, whether they actually break themselves or the comb is like, okay, we've had this comb for a long time. It doesn't look healthy. Like, the darker it is, you can tell there's been brood laid there over and over and over again, which potentially could be a spot where disease is hiding, or varroa or other things. So just be aware of that. So you have to kind of balance the frame manipulation, the drawing out new comb, and you want to do it well, right? And so we have a good amount of foundation that we want drawn out so that we have drawn comb for future hives, right? And so that we can have that for the long term. But in some instances, you may want to purchase some drawn comb because it's quicker than waiting for the bees to build it. And you're going to probably get more honey that season because of it. But it's one of those things you just have to navigate the dynamics of it. And then if you don't have any drawn out comb for like a third box, you're going to kind of do the same thing so that they have that comb drawn out and can produce honey. Like for us, in our first and second box, we'll have brood in it, but the third and above, we're not going to have any brood. It's going to be all honey. And so for those boxes, you just got to have drawn comb that they can make honey off of. So that is kind of in a nutshell, frame manipulation. You want the brood to stay in the middle, but you want to also checkerboard. Um, and this does help with swarming too, from what I've heard, where it kind of gives the bees something to do and not just grow their population in a crazy way. If it's all comb, you're going to run the risk of swarming a lot higher because they can lay brood quicker, they can grow quicker. So you have to be on top of that if you have all comb. If you've got foundation, you're going to want to go back and forth.
That's very interesting. How many beekeepers would you say are using this manipulation method?
I think every commercial beekeeper is going to be doing it like this. There are some people, and if you're a backyard beekeeper or you have a couple hives, you may not do this. One, you may not have enough frames to do this, right? It takes a little bit of, I have drawn and I have foundation. If you only have drawn or you only have foundation, you're not going to be doing this. It's going to look a little different. But every larger operation is going to be doing this because unless you just have excess comb set aside.
There's not a lot of these commercial keepers. I was actually looking back at some emails from Tim, who we work with on the bees. And in an email that he sent last fall, he said there's only 5 commercial beekeeping companies
in Washington State
that are about his size, which isn't very big. 500 hives at the time from his email. In Washington, that's a very small amount of beekeepers. So,
but
I'm guessing
probably a large percentage of
our
the
backyard
hives,
beekeepers.
Yeah, a large percentage of the hives in the state probably all come from these people, right? Maybe some from California, because California does ship out a lot of hives.
Sure, they sell their hives, and people are selling.
But so some people argue to not do frame manipulation because they want like more of a natural approach, or let the bees do the bee thing, whatever. Let them do their thing. I understand the sentiment around that, but I think that that's not the best approach. If you're a backyard beekeeper, I would encourage you to do some frame manipulation, maybe not as much as a commercial person, but you don't want cross comb. Like you don't want frames that you can't rip apart, whether you want to extract and then you have all these frames that are just a problem, or you don't want varroa to grow inside those frames if you're not checking them. Every frame you should be able to take out of the hive, lift it up, and look at it and inspect it. If you can't do that with your frame, then you have cross comb, and you need to break that up, and you need to move that frame to another section so they don't redraw that comb in that pattern.
And how often should someone be getting into their hive to check?
It depends. I mean, sometimes every week, sometimes not. Like, if you get into your hive and it's all good, they have great brood, there's eggs and larvae, I've seen the queen, they're well fed, you may not need to get in that hive next week. You can maybe wait a couple weeks. If you get in your hive and you see a lot of queen cells, you can't find the queen, you're like, okay, I probably need to check this hive in 3 to 4 days to determine if a queen has emerged, and see what's happening. Because then she's a virgin queen. Is the weather good? Is she going to go out? And so you may have checked that hive in 3 or 4 days, and then you might want to check it again in 3 or 4 days to see if your queen has gone out and it's now laying. So you might have to check that hive a couple times within a week or week and a half. And and hive A is great, strong, no problems. You don't really need to worry about it. Maybe you give it a little bit of feed and move on. So it depends, and it's all weather dependent. So some hives, like most of the hives that are at our yard right now, are in good shape. There's a handful that are weaker for a variety of reasons, that we've had a few queen replacements. Those ones need a little bit more attention. I need to make sure they have more food at the gate. But also, I have to monitor robbing. Because they're a weaker hive, are stronger hives picking on them? Do I need to reduce the entrance? Do the hives that are robbing, do they have food so that they don't feel the need to be robbing? So you got to check all of these kinds of things. So your hive inspection could be...
Do you have a checklist for this that you follow?
I do. I'm right now, a lot of it just kind of going off the cuff of like what I see in the hive. But I do have a checklist. I do have a beekeeping log that kind of gives me a list of things to look for. Sometimes I follow it, sometimes I don't, because when you're in the hive in the moment, sometimes it's hard to, go back to pen and paper. And I got to make a decision here quick because I have 1 hour window of what to do, right? Like it's going to rain in an hour or the weather's going to drop here in the next 2 hours. I got to just make some decisions here quickly on what I'm doing. Or the baseline is, okay, I'm not sure what I'm seeing here. I need to come back in a few days or a week and double check. Was there a queen in here? I couldn't tell. Or something like that. But at least I'm going to feed, at least I'm making sure that there is food.
What do you think's better, the pollen patty or the sugar water? What would you recommend?
Sugar water is probably the number one go-to. In the spring and early summer, pollen patties are great because that's when you're going to get a lot of brood and the hive is going to begin to grow a lot more. So pollen patties are great to help the brood chamber.
So you like both?
I do like both. Sugar water is something you're going to do for sure throughout the season. 1-to-1 ratio in the beginning. And then, preparing for winter, you're going to do some 2-to-1 to help strengthen the hive and help them out.
Can a backyard beekeeper go buy sugar water or should they make their own?
You should just make your own if you have just a handful of hives.
Is it pretty simple to do?
Yeah. Get some granulated sugar. Do not get organic. I know it seems like it would be a better solution. Organic, it's nature. No, you're going to get your bees sick. They're going to have diarrhea. Like, you don't want that. Good. No, it's gross. I'm not going to go there. It's a gross thing. And you don't want it, and you don't want your bees to have it. And so granulated sugar, pretty much any brand is going to be fine. Don't do brown sugar or anything like that. And just mix it for...
How do you tell when a bee has diarrhea?
Your hive's going to be very messy. Let me tell you that. And you are going to see bees flying. You're going to see bees flying out and dropping bombs. You know what I mean? Like,
I feel like we're in an episode of Honey, I Shrunk the Kids. There's so little.
Yeah, you can just watch, and if a lot of bees are coming out, and just if it's real messy at the entrance, if you open the hive up, and it's poop.
Does it smell bad? Really?
I've not experienced this, but I imagine it would smell bad. Just imagine. You got a couple 100,000 kids.
Bees get diarrhea.
So be careful what sugar you use. What we do is kind of like a 5-gallon ratio. So in a 5-gallon bucket, you're going to want 25 pounds of granulated sugar, and then you fill up. I usually fill up water first and then drop that in. You fill the bucket up about halfway, maybe a little bit less than halfway, because I always want to favor the sugar slightly. If I'm going to mix incorrect ratio, I'd rather favor sugar than water, not dilute it, but have more sugar. So, and then if, in your bucket, there's a little bit of sugar left over once you feed, you pour it in, whatever, add a little bit more water, mix it up together. So.
Does the sugar water dilute the honey at all?
Yes. So anytime you feed the bees sugar water, it's not great for honey extracting, because that honey most likely is directly from the sugar water. Now, perhaps you fed them and they just haven't really drank much of the sugar water and they went out and grabbed a lot of pollen and nectar and made some good honey. They definitely could. But because you put sugar water in there, it's likely that they took from that sugar water. And so when you make raw honey, not when you got to extract it. It's when the bees make it. When you extract the raw honey, you have to, there's a tool that you can use to kind of basically see the water count within the honey. And if it's past 18%, then it's not something you can sell. So the water content has to be below 18%.
So
should be in the 18% ballpark.
Yeah. So is there a time in the season where you're pulling out the sugar water?
Yeah, probably July. Like for us, Every beekeeping season is going to be different. If you're in Florida, it's going to be different. If you're in California, it's going to be different.
But Western
But
Washington.
for us, July, maybe in the beginning of July, you feed with sugar water. Depends on your hive strength, right? If they're a weaker hive, continue to feed because you want them to be strong to get through the winter. That's the ultimate goal, is that they're strong for the following year, because then you can do more splits. You can have more honey the following year. So maybe not every hive is great this year, but mid July into August, you're not going to want to be doing a lot of feeding because you want to do extracting in August. But then you got to know, is there a dearth? Do I got to feed because there's a dearth and there's just not food out there for the bees? Then you're going to want to feed.
And remind our audience what the dearth is again for anybody who may not know.
That's when there's not a natural food supply, when they just can't go out and get food on their own. They can't get the pollen and nectar that they want, that they need. That's a dearth. So, I'm not going to sit here and say I know all of the seasonal dearth opportunities, but the more you can know when something's in bloom, when there isn't a bloom, where your bees are located, and what's in bloom, where they're at, that's going to influence, that's going to let you know, is there a dearth, is there not a dearth, what flow is out, what's not out. We're going to have blackberries coming up soon, so having bees near blackberries is going to be great. And so, yeah, just pay attention.
So the big thing is people always talk about save the bees. You see it all over the place. And you see experienced beekeepers saying, well, if you really want to save the bees, plant flowers. Plant
things. The best thing you can plant is plant something that blooms when nothing else is. So
what would an example of that be?
If in your area there's great bloom of, I don't know, something in May and June, but nothing in July and August, plant something that's going to bloom in July and August. That's a great way to provide a natural food resource for the bees. So if things are well balanced, that's always going to be helpful. And then if you're a beekeeper yourself, feed your bees. Don't let them just do their thing and end up dying because you didn't give them the time they needed.
And maybe that's why planting flowers is important, because you can plant things like primroses as you get into the fall, or pansies in the summer. There's so many varieties of flowers that when you plant them, they're always blooming. So maybe that's why a lot of experienced beekeepers, even like Dr. Lawrence, who was on our call, was a proponent of don't go buy beehives, go buy flowers.
Yeah.
Bees love flowers. And a lot of what we talked about today, just to kind of bring this thing in for a landing, is, frame manipulation is important to look at. It's important to get into your hives once a week, every 2 weeks, depending on how the hive is doing. Feed your hives. Pollen patties are important for the brood chamber. So maybe as we're starting to grow. And then we've got sugar water, which is, important during these rainy days or these cold days when the bee can't get out because they're just going to hang out in the hive and snack. And so we don't want them to, eat all their honey or get weak, or like we've seen a lot on the internet, a lot of bee loss, a lot of people complaining about losing their hives. And a lot of people are really sad about this. I mean, this is really breaking a lot of hearts. So there's a lot of great tips here. There's a lot that we've taken from the show. Any final thoughts before we bring this in for a close?
We're not experts here, but we are learning, and we're building Honey for Hope here. And so I'm hoping that you're learning with us, and that we're providing you some great information at this point in the season. Continue to feed, continue to get in there and check your hives. If you're having queen issues, it's still possible to fix that and to have a strong-ish hive. We're getting to the point that that's going to be difficult, but continue to feed, continue to inspect, and I hope that your hive is doing well. The weather's been a little crazy here, and we hope it levels out and is just consistently good beekeeping weather.
It's been a little bit crazy. Well, that was a great episode, talking about a lot of important things going on in the hives. I'm your host, Dave Westcott. Follow me on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, anywhere where it's social, I'm hanging out. If you want to send me a direct message, the best place is LinkedIn. Send me a direct message there. I respond as frequently and as quickly as possible. And Scott, where can anybody in the audience get a hold of you?
Probably Instagram is the best, at Scott Callentine. I don't really check anything else in social media realms. Not addicted to TikTok, slightly addicted to Instagram. I don't do Facebook or Twitter anymore. So
congratulations, you've made the big leap.
Thank you.
I'm not.
I try.
I'm not to
Limit my addictions, right?
I'm not to Instagram yet. I haven't gone back enough years yet, but I'm working on my Instagram. I'm working on it. There's so much going on Instagram.
Yeah.
It's just a
sometimes
mess.
I just delete the app for a few days. So I'm like, man, I'm scrolling far too often. It's just not good.
Do you really have that problem?
Absolutely.
We could go a whole different way on this show.
We could.
But I'm hoping, in case your wife watches, I don't want to say anything and get you in trouble. All right, we're going to bring this thing in for a landing. Scott, thanks for joining us today. It's been a fabulous show. Honey for Hope, check it out. And if you're looking for some honey orders, check out the website because honey goes fast, and we got our pre-orders in now today. So check it out. Have a great day. Thanks for joining Teach Me Bees.
See y'all later.